Today is the day we finally delve into the villains of Hoodwinked. If you haven't seen the video where I tried solving the absolutely massive hidden mystery behind Nikki Flippers and the Sisterhood, I will link it above right now. It's great, and this video will make a lot more sense if you've seen, well, part 1 first. Believe me when I say that Hansel, Gretel, and Boingo are indeed almost equally as wild when it comes to domino revelations, and they aren't even the only ones on the chopping block today. Hello, I'm the Theorizer. I'm hereby operating under the assumption that you've seen both Hoodwinked films as well as part 1 of my overall theory here. So Hansel and Gretel will be our first focus today. I was going to transition real smooth-like by discussing how Hansel and Gretel seem to know Red's weakness as being called a scared little girl, and how Red knew that they knew because she and her team manipulated them with that fact, but it's seriously a road to nowhere, a spiraling pit of Ouroboros logic, so let me just slam you as hard as I can with the truth. These kids are filled to the brim with more connections and mystery than I could digest in a lifetime, let alone one video. But I'm going to do it anyways. So midway through the second movie, Granny busts out of her shackles to rescue the kids, and when she first arrives, they are sitting there eating junk food and watching Hoodwinked. What does this mean? What am I supposed to do with this? No, this is too early. Why? Alright, so they're not just watching Hoodwinked, they're actually watching the scene where Kirk sings his Schnitzel song. This is, let's just say, interesting to note. The notion that Hoodwinked is a film within a film, and that all of the main characters are actors turned spies in the vein of Flippers, is something I plan to get to later. Maybe. The fact of the matter is, however, that Kirk is possibly acting when singing his song in one way or another, as this must have been filmed, because the kids are watching it. Technicalities aside for a second, my point is that there seems to be a link of sorts right here. What do I mean by that? Well, I have reason to believe that through some means, they have a connection to Kirk. Let's look at the evidence. Hansel and Gretel are German. Not only that, but I refer to them as the Grimm twins because I find it easy, and because the assimilators, and for our purposes authors, of the story Hansel and Gretel are the brothers Grimm. These two, and more importantly the fairy tale itself, are very much so German. Hansel and Gretel are infamously two little German kids who go out and eat an evil gingerbread house. It's a tale of woe and innocuous predators. A Venus flytrap tale. Everything in it is based in Germany. This isn't even a necessary deep dive, because characters call them German numerously within the film. So we have two German children sitting there watching a show containing another character who is, yes, German as well. One of the only other German characters in Hoodwinked, Kirk constantly goes around selling schnitzels, a notorious German treat. Every time Hansel and Gretel require an expletive, they use, get this,
Schnitzel.
Even more directly, who else uses the expletive schnitzel? Kirk. Well, that's a pretty damning connection there. They're all German. They all worship schnitzels, and the kids are watching Kirk do this song and dance act. On top of all that, these kids eat like mad, and Kirk is a food vendor. Coincidence? No. Is that all? No. Get a load of this. When confronted about their eating habits, they claim to be children of a poor woodcutter who never bought them any food. A poor, unemployed woodcutter? But Kirk is an actor playing a woodcutter, right? At first I was inclined to say that they are actually the children of Paul Bunyan, the person Kirk is playing. Their ties to Kirk are too undeniable, though, which leads me to believe that they were referring to Kirk's aspirations. You see, he consistently plays woodcutters. In the second film, he becomes a woodcutter showman, proving this point once again, that he surrounds himself with such a lifestyle. And the fact of all this woodcutter connectedness is noteworthy. It's shockingly coincidental. The kids spend half of the second film playing innocent and acting just like Kirk does, their father. So genetics largely aren't an issue with them either. We don't know their mother, but Kirk's hair and eye colors aren't radically different to any degree that would make this family impossible. It's all very much so able to happen. But speaking of Kirk in the second film, he misses Hansel and Gretel just barely misses them whenever he arrives on the scene. Coincidence? I think not. But let's take an even deeper look at their adjacent behaviors. This further dive will not only allow even more evidence for their connections, but it will also allow us to move on to the next major theory of mine. Kirk is starved of fame, and the Grimm twins are starved of nutrition. Both got what they wanted in between films. Saying that, though, would be slightly disingenuous because Hansel and Gretel more specifically want tasty food. This is like the original Hansel and Gretel story where two kids desperate for snacks fall right into the trap of an evil witch. This also sounds eerily similar to something else, though. Kirk's main occupation throughout the first Hoodwinked seems to be calling out to children so he can lure them in for schnitzels. He yodels and plays music, and it almost eerily lures them all in, just like a Venus flytrap or a gingerbread house. Kirk is providing for other children, but not his own. It makes me wonder what happened exactly. Is Kirk a terrible parent who abandoned his children for fame, or did they leave him, find a real gingerbread house, and that's how they met Verushka to start all of this planning? Did they try to recreate it in the second film to fool everyone? Hi, sorry, this is just me cutting in while editing, but as it plays and as they watch it, you can hear just in the corner before Granny enters the room, Hansel says, "I am filling that hole inside of me with food." It's like, this is to imply that as they watch Hoodwinked, and they're eating to fill that void that Kirk left with food. Things are weird, timing is weird, but I'll return to Verushka later because my point in all of this is to prove one singular thing. Hansel and Gretel are from the exact same forest that the first film takes place. They are the impoverished children of a struggling method actor. This amazingly explains their disdain for Granny Puckett. They never had enough money to eat her snacks, and this is why they had preemptive hatred for her and anyone that surrounds her. They lived right down the street. These children lived in that big bad forest for many years, tempted by the treats around them, but miserable because their father could never find any work. He is a man who was desperate for fame, but could only pull off woodcutters, a role he had absolutely no knowledge of. He sold treats in his spare time, luring in money from children to fund his aspirations instead of his own children. His children eventually went missing after they gave up, and Kirk was fated to repeat his misery over and over again, failing repeatedly until he got his call back. We know Kirk's story, but the paths of Hansel and Gretel are unknown until now. You see, here's where things start getting good. Hansel and Gretel are desperate for snacks, more desperate than your average person, but they are not just desperate to eat, they are also desperate to monopolize on their desperation by exploiting the desperation of others. They call the super truffle the greatest dessert of all time, and they plan to become the, quote, the filthy rich. They scream this outright. Their initial desperation wasn't evil because something happened to them. Something in between leaving Kirk and meeting Verushka that tipped them over the edge. Something that resulted from them seeking out the money they needed. Something that turned them into extremely greedy supervillains. This event must have changed them, broke them. Some sort of shady incident that Nicky Flippers must know about because, suspicious as ever, he finishes the second film claiming that he knows of a rehabilitation method that will work on them. As we established last video, Nicky was intimately aware of all the evil plans going on around him in both films. These kids cannot be products of their own operation, which leaves only one remaining option. Hansel and Gretel are not evil. They are merely the face of Boingo's continued operation. Boingo explains his evil plan during the climax of the first Hoodwinked. He says that he has synthesized a sort of chemical that creates a borderline brainwashed addiction within those who ingest it. He calls it Boingonium. He openly shows a couple of tests he ran on children. Children who, upon ingesting the food he filled with Boingonium, began to develop an obsessive desire to get more and more, which is how Hansel words their plan with the super truffles, force their consumers to want more and more. An artistic recreation of one of Boingo's subjects reflects this, but if you haven't guessed yet, I'm not saying that Hansel and Gretel are merely continuing the operation while Boingo's imprisoned. I'm saying, of course, that they were the test subjects, and that they are in fact deluded and brainwashed by the addictive chemical. They aren't just redistributing Boingonium, they ingested it themselves. These children fled their father out of desperation and were taken in by Boingo so he could experiment on them and synthesize the Boingonium. This all thoroughly explains why they are desperate for snacks and why they're out of their minds. And why Nicky Flippers has an understanding of how to rehabilitate such individuals makes sense, as he was aware of all of Verushka's plans and thus likely theirs too. He let them toy with her out of vengeance against her, but we already covered that last time. No, in short, Hansel and Gretel are not evil. They were merely taken advantage of by Boingo. There's so much more to this though, because Boingo's still influencing them throughout the duration of the second film, and we know this for an absolute fact because Verushka literally visits him in prison as he interferes and provides her with information. This is all the truth. I am shocked at how deep this goes, but this is what I meant by 5 videos and Hoodwinked breaking me. There's more Boingo affiliates too. All of the tiny characters in the show are banded together in some sort of evil coalition. I'm not joking. While I highly doubt Twitchy's involved, basically everyone else is. It's the literally small characters. I don't know if Nikki Flipper's dog is a part of it, but I get shivers when Red is distracted by a little woodpecker when dealing with a foreboding message from the Goody Bandit, or when this rat reveals to her where she should go, which ends up being something of a death trap. But these two connections are loose and pathetic. I'd roast myself if I were so inclined, but here's the kicker. Here's something that nobody has ever put together, and I guarantee it. To be fair, I doubt anyone has bothered to spend any amount of time putting any of this together, considering my videos are basically the only hoodwinked theories on the entire internet. Kicker is this. Lady Squirrels. After Wolf and Twitchy abandon Red in the city during the second film, Red goes all over the place, miserable, looking for Dark Castle towers. She asks numerous creatures about it before asking 2 highly offended Lady Squirrels. They shrug it off, and then just minutes later, they appear walking out of Twitchy's trailer in the middle of the wilderness. Shortly after that, Twitchy and Wolf rejoin the action following an assault from the 3 pigs. Do you not see what is happening here? They work for the Grimm twins. This is the real story. After seeing Red was alone, the 2 spies did a mad scramble trying to find her now isolated associates to kill them. The ladies find Twitchy in the middle of nowhere, and the instant they flee the scene, the mercenaries arrive to kill Wolf and Twitchy. This is a conspiracy. I am not lying, I am not exaggerating, I am serious, and I am right. You want your damning linchpin, you want it so badly, don't you? The giant, who is completely immersed in the criminal underbelly of this world, consistently screams as loudly as he can to never trust short people. Short people. The shorter, the more evil. He has bad experiences with little creatures. He is most likely primarily referring to the Grimm twins here because he has ties to them. This is why the HEA went to him for information. For God's sake, his own entertainer, the harp, is the one that led Red to Boingo. He said to find the bunny in prison, and this angry giant who has been slighted time and time again vilifies those responsible. Short people, which was a clue to the audience to figure out what was revealed minutes later, that being that the Grimm twins were evil. He probably gave them the Dark Castle towers, and I know it's all tied because the filmmakers used the same phrase. Never trust a bunny, never trust short people. Now the ones who aren't particularly short would be the mercenary pigs, but they've got their own reasons. I'll get to the inferiority complex stuff in a minute, but first, these pigs. We're doing all the main villains in this video, so we need to solve them too before we ultimately get around to Boingo's rationale. You see, the 3 pigs have a massive story behind them too. In the first Hoodwinked movie, the 3 pigs are seen throughout the crime scene. They nibble at cookies here and there, and they're essentially just bumbling, ordinary old cops. They talk about how they built houses out of straw and such, but they don't seem to know the wolf. Then in the second film, they seem to be Mexican and they're working for the bad guys? Yes, they even ask for, well, more cookies. Now they know the wolf, and they blow up his trailer. What happened? Well, believe it or not, there's a sneaky little arc here, too. At the very end of the first film, Wolf says he's about to bust the 3 pigs for their home improvement scam. Clearly, between films, he did. Clearly, between films, they revolted, and clearly, between films, they were trained in Mexico to use illegal weaponry. Essentially, they were fired from their jobs as policemen, and they teamed up with the enemy to take down Wolf. They even called him the Chupacabra. See? Lore. Boingo. We've done everyone but Boingo. Saving the best for last, this is a doozy, and it explains damn near everything. Here we go. I have reason to believe that Boingo has a severe inferiority complex. Boingo serves the Muffin Man, a baker who seems to be in competition against Granny Puckett. Perhaps the Muffin Man is also that snack shack guy's boss? Would explain his grumpiness, I suppose. I believe the boss's name was Earl. Who knows? Who cares? Point is, Boingo is devastated and driven insane by the fact that his unassuming demeanor has ravaged his ambitions. He cries and laughs like a maniac following his discussion of the Muffin Man and how he is done working for people. He plans to change the world and let the little critters rise up. He has basically recruited a secret army of short people. But what was his plan exactly? In the first film, he methodically tricked and manipulated every single one of the main characters into one situation, the cottage confrontation. He then wormed his way in and stole the recipe book. Why? Was this all to keep the police distracted while he let loose the dynamite to blow up the valley? Or was he engineering a more metaphorical explosion of the pressure cooker that was these characters' relationships? Well, it would seem so, and it's all in line with the idea that Nicky Flippers was using such a plan to his advantage too. Boingo told Wolf how to get to Granny's house and compelled him to do so. He shoved Red down into the forest so she'd meet Wolf and set up the confrontation. He obviously, of course, sent his henchmen down after Granny Puckett, but Kirk is where things get interesting, because it may loop back into the rest of my theory. Boingo is seen standing right there when Kirk's truck is robbed, and this robbery officially put Kirk out of business and ultimately landed him in the cottage conflict too. But I'd say it's possible that Boingo even used whatever habit-forming technology brainwashed these singing children for his own addictive purposes. In fact, if anyone filmed that song to allow the Grimm twins to view it on their TV, it would have been Boingo, the only other one right there. We'll see, the timeline is a tiny bit unstable at the moment, but it is all interconnected. I mean, Kirk isn't the only actor these kids learnt from, considering they pulled the exact same ruse that Boingo did. And then they proceed to say, "You've been hoodwinked too." These children are fully tied to Boingo. He trained them, and it's because they are continuing his evil plan. Boingo wanted to be known as the face of his evil corporation. Getting all of the characters together just led to his defeat, because something tells me it was all a part of his scheme. Boingo doesn't just feel inferior, he wants to be seen as evil. Boingo is desperate to fail, almost. It's because he selfishly is desperate for the world to know how smart and evil he is. That's what this is all about. He can happily live behind bars because he still derives joy from the knowledge that he hoodwinked all of his friends. He draws graphic images of their deaths in his prison cell. He wants to be seen as evil. He mimics Hannibal Lecter. He hired a team of extremely evil-looking Eastern European henchmen and was dismayed at how the name Keith was so innocuous, demanding it be changed. He loves the term evil. He doesn't even love being called a genius, but he relishes in the evil part. Nowhere is this more obvious than the fact that his personal clipboard is titled Evil Plan. It's remarkable how he functions. Again, Nicky is aware of absolutely all this. He has ties to him and has knowledge and controls the situations. We discussed Woolworth's Bo Peep statement, but not the ultimate purpose of this conversation, that being the disclosure of Red's location. I repeat, Woolworth was the one who told Wolf that Red was in the cable car. Instantaneous news that could only come from one possible source, the other person up there with her. Boingo's plan was to destroy everyone and reveal himself in the process. He mocks Granny by taunting how Red doesn't trust her anymore, because it was all according to his plan. He is evil, and who knows how many more pieces and plans are out there. The Boingonium subjects are probably spread far and wide, and I bet he tested on all the Schnitzel children too. I'd also bet he took his own Boingonium. So is anyone truly evil here? Well, that might be a topic I'll discuss next time, when I inevitably cover Hoodwinked again. Give me a little more than a month this time, because shockingly I managed to get most of the big points out here in these two videos because I went fast, but I still need to discuss Red's parents and the timeline, of course. There's a much more solid overlap than you might assume between these two videos of mine. It's amazingly enjoyable to do, though. They say the giant blogs about movies and that he should get a life. I can't help but feel personally devastated by that statement, and thus my counter roast would be that maybe this film should get a budget. Out here looking like claymation without the clay, seeing slicker models in a demolished aardvark mannequin factory, headass. Point is, in all this, shit's clever, and I'm still not done.